Hey everyone, welcome to Story Mantra. I'm your host, Anju Gattani, and today we have our very first historical fiction author. Yay! I am so excited. I'm so excited because I love historical fiction. I love the world building that's involved. And I love the women and the men behind the book and the characters that bring the world to life. So who do we have today? We have a USA Today bestselling author. Her name is Deb Hunter. She's a historian. And sometimes she writes as Hunter S. Jones. She publishes independently and via traditional publishing platforms. So I'm going to poke around a little and ask Deb questions about the two different types of publishing experiences she's had, and maybe she can share some of her experience and wisdom with all of us. Oh, so back to Deb. She has actively promoted the craft of historical writing through affiliation with many professional groups, including Society of Authors, founded by Lord Tennyson, the Royal Historical Society, the American Historical Association, and the Organization of American Historians. Tying into that, I want to quickly tell you, tune in to this 3-part episode, because at the end, what I have learned so far from just my chat with Deb is, as a fiction author, the power is in the pen, yes, but you have the ability, as Deb has. Yes, thank you. Can we see that pen again? But Deb has done something phenomenal in that she has gone above and beyond her books to create and do something on social media, which is bigger than what she'd ever imagined it could be. So stay tuned for the 3rd episode to kind of catch wind of what she's done. But when she's not writing, talking, or tweeting about kings, queens, and rock star, Deb lives in Midtown Atlanta and rural Tennessee with her Scottish-born husband. All her social media links are below. Her website is below, and the Amazon and other purchase links are below too. So welcome, Deb. And I've coughed myself out. I'm so excited to have historical fiction author. I just kind of choked myself, but welcome.
Thank you. It is so nice of you to have me today. I appreciate it. And it's always nice talking to another female writer from Atlanta. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, well, no, we enjoy, having anyone and everyone who loves and is passionate about storytelling. So a bunch of things to ask you. First of all, I'd love to see, a cover or something about a historical fiction book you've written.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I'll just have, this is my best-selling history book. That's called Sexuality and Its Impact on History, The British Stripped Bare.
Did you hold it up a little? Ta-da, there we are. All right.
It's an anthology I put together for Pen and Sword history books out of the UK. And it's 8 women writers that have put together British history from Anglo-Saxons to the Victorians. And it's all about how sexual mores shape cultural boundaries and had more importance than we might think they do right now. And it was a #1 bestseller.
Congratulations.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Wow, that is phenomenal. And let me ask you something. What does it mean to be a historian?
There are a lot of answers to that. And thank you for asking. In America, it is considered someone who has a history undergraduate, an art history undergraduate degree, or some type of museum associated degree. So like a public historian. So that's basically the boundaries here. I know the internet has spawned a lot of historians, and it's good to get different viewpoints, but technically in America, that's what they look for.
What does history mean to you, though? What does it mean to you?
A historian is like a detective, only they're working with the past. It's that simple. You take a theory and you research it, you try to find answers, and you put those answers together, and you have your argument, your dissertation. So
when you've done all this research, from not creation, but, real things that have happened in the past, how do you then sort of create from there, or create from that point on to bring your fiction to life?
For fiction, what I do is actually research the era I'm writing about and find out what they wore, what they ate, even though it's not going to be a historical document,
Mhm.
I shape my characters to give them life in the times they lived in.
Mhm. And that means a lot of world building, I'm sure.
A lot of world building, a lot of research. So it's almost as difficult, sometimes maybe more so, to write historical fiction than to write actual history. Both require, and they're two different things. I really shouldn't even be comparing them. But you need research for both.
Mhm. And how do you go about, like, in terms of your process of bringing, something which is so factually based to life in your work, along with the characters? Like, how is it a process where it's all planned beforehand and then it kind of merges together, or is it all segmented? How does it work for you?
That's definitely it. It all starts with an idea, of course, and then from that idea, I'm one of those that doesn't outline. I don't outline every single thing, but it's like, here, this is chapter 1, here's the end. And I tend to write my last chapter before I write anything else for some reason. I always know how a story is going to end.
Mm.
Generally, starting the story is the hardest part for me.
Mhm.
So from there, you have your characters and you basically build your characters up. Again, you find out what they ate, what they would have worn, what type of fabric their dress would have, or their trousers would have been made out of. So how they spent their day. And you, like you said, you world build from there. So everyone's still people, whether they live now or 500 years ago. Human beings all have the same motivations, basically. We want to, oops. Dear.
Oh,
That dang group, that
I-
group cut me off. Okay, yeah. Human beings all have the same needs as we did 500 years ago. So it's just putting them in the box to fit in your book, really.
Well, here's a question I have, because I come from a slightly different perspective with my work. So my world stems, and it's, art, well, it's world building that I do because I'm taking the reader to another country, in the same way that you're taking readers to another era. But my world arises from my characters. The world building happens, and it's an extension of the characters.
Oh, I love that.
Which is never planned. I don't know what the world is like until I put pen to paper, literally, and start writing the characters out. And then, I start fleshing them and I see them come alive on the page. And that's when their world comes alive. So when I'm thinking from this perspective, I want to understand, how does your world, which is already rooted in history, does that world give birth to the characters, or do the characters tell you what of aspects of the world building you need to, or what aspect or what era the story is taking place? How does it work for you?
Most of my stories, my fictional stories, have been set in Tudor England or inspired by that era.
Okay.
So a lot is documented about that, fortunately. So it makes it easy to find these things out. And of course, certain figures were more popular: kings, the queens, the queen consorts, the courtiers. Those things are already set up. Now, I've never written anything from the point of view of an everyday person, which would be really interesting.
Mm.
I know what I'm writing right now is two actors who are acting out the parts of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. So fortunately, I already know a lot about that part of history. So it's really more about how to build the story and give my characters life.
Mm. And we talked about something quite funny that you mentioned, where the actors that you're working with have a very different relationship on stage versus off stage. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, it's just been great. They're
About
playing
the affiliation, how did you get involved with these actors, and where does your production heading? Tell me a little more about that too.
There again, the love story of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn is what has captivated people for 500 years, not how he had her executed, but their actual love story, how he changed an entire country so he can marry her.
Right.
And these two actors, I wanted to do the story justice. So it just seemed like having people act it out, because it's been presented so many different ways. And I wanted to try something new with Kindlevella, since it is a new platform and it is in beta. So my Henry and Anne are two people on a film set, and they're acting out this great love story, but they really don't like each other at all, which most of us that have had a job know how it is not to like someone you have to work with every single day. And it's just a wonderful way to have that conflict in there, basically from the very first paragraph. So they can't stand each other. Their dislike of each other is leading to the film going over budget. It's just leading to all kinds of problems. So I'm curious to see how they start reconciling their differences, or if they even do that.
Wow. So tell me a little bit about the film project. Where is it happening? When does it get filmed? Are you involved in the production? Is there an option that was signed? And if so, how did all that fall in place?
There isn't one right now. So, and if there is, I couldn't talk about it.
No.
So, but, you know, episodic television is extremely popular right now. And fortunately, Kindle is making Kindlevella a beta in the US. So you can literally write out your episodes as you're going along. And I found that to be wildly creative, because I can sit down and decide what my characters are going to do instead of plotting out a novel or a novella. I just sit down and come up with the episode for this week, just like you would do with a TV show. And it's just opened up an entire new world of creation for me. It's just, I think it's the most creative project I've ever had. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, no. And does your audience's reaction, if you're able to gauge that, does that affect the next episode you're going to write?
I've actually had feedback from theater people, believe it or not, quite a lot of feedback from people saying, this reminds me of when I was an actor, or this reminds me when I did this, or I've lived this. And there's nothing better for a writer than to have people identify with your characters. And you've probably found that too, when someone writes you or calls you and says, this is just like me, you know, it's just so, it's the best compliment ever, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable that sometimes fiction can become so real, that people identify with the characters as if it were them or a part of them.
Exactly. And I really think that's what makes for a good reading experience. Right. Don't you? When you're reading a book, if you can identify with even one of the characters, aren't you more interested in the storyline?
Absolutely. I'm emotionally hooked right there and then. And, you know, I may identify more sometimes with a secondary character, but then if the secondary characters also somehow reflect or contrast with the main character, you're always involved in the story. So as long as you have someone you can identify with, I think that's key.
That's so true. And that's one thing about episodic fiction. Sometimes your secondary characters can take the forefront, because again, it's like a TV show. You know, they may just have one chapter, but you get to, instead of just concentrating on these two people and their storyline, you know, all of a sudden the producer may get an episode, or the director may get an episode. It's almost like an ensemble piece if you were working in theater, because you have all these people involved in your story, and it's so much fun to write.
Well, so I'd love to ask you something more. How does it differ in terms of, well, dealing with the characters that you created on the page versus on stage?
A lot of the dialogue is inner dialogue, because you're coming from that first person point of view. Whereas if you were writing for an audience, it's more about projecting to them. So that's the biggest difference.
Wow. So does that affect you when you're writing now that you've been in both arenas? When you write the next episode?
It really does, because I get to become that character for one episode. I get to think, oh, how would Daisy think? What would she feel? How would she react? So you get to become that character for a few minutes.
A few minutes. Wow. Well, that's wonderful. So how did you get into writing, Deb? That's what I'd love to know. How did it all begin for you?
I am one of those people that has been involved in writing something my entire life. I ran the high school newspaper, college newspaper. I've always submitted articles. Started interviewing bands, when I was a kid. Again, the Nashville thing never really leaves you. So I've always written something all the time. So thank you for asking.
Yeah. And you talked about having grown up with musicians and the difference between that group versus writers group. Could you talk to our audience about that?
Most of my experience has been around musicians, because I did spend my formative years in Nashville. They are not afraid to promote. It's all about promoting your show, getting people out, and it's a different type personality. Now, a lot of them are actually introverts, but on stage, their craft makes them an extrovert. But you come into writing, and most writers are actually introverts. So especially with indie publishing, it's a whole new thing, because we have this group of introverts that they've never promoted anything, and all of a sudden they're promoting their book, and it's just a whole new learning curve. But for somebody like me that's been promoting something their entire life, I actually enjoyed the promotion as much as I do the writing.
Right.
So I feel for them in a way, because they've never really promoted anything.
How do you balance the two sides? Because that's a question that every author has, the writing versus the marketing and the promotion. And of course, you've also seen the aspect on stage. So you've got all these, solid ground experiences. How do you balance it all?
You just find your groove. It's that simple. You find what's best. A lot of people will hire someone to do it for them. I don't mind doing it myself. You just find your own way of promoting it. There's still people that don't have social media platforms, and they do just fine, because whatever network they have works for them. Mm-hmm. And I got out there when social media was still kind of new for writers. So I do have a lot more experience than most people do. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm not shy to tell people, oh, I've got this out here now, or do things like that, like a lot of people might be.
Right. Well, that's great. Great information. And I also wanted to, quickly touch upon, first of all, what is Kindlevella? When you told me about it, I was like, this is interesting. It's a combination of Kindle and novella. So what is it exactly?
It's really, Vela is short for novella. And what Amazon is doing is doing a beta for the US audience only that is serial fiction. Serial fiction is wildly popular in Asia. It's caught on like wildfire in that market. And Radish has made it extremely popular in the US, as has Wattpad. So there are Wattpad Radish stars that are coming to Amazon's Kindle platform now and going exclusively with Vela. So it's just another way to write. For instance, let's use mine, for example, and it's called Fables, a Tudor fairy tale. Once I've got that completed, I can turn that into a novel and then publish it on Amazon. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of it's almost like a blog and a storyline, but you have to put a cliffhanger on every single chapter to keep people coming back for more. Whereas with a novel, you don't really do that. Novel readers don't care for that. Right. So it's a real balancing act, and it's something fun and new for me, at least.
So this is probably what I'm guessing from what you said is probably an episodic thing where you release an episode every week or so. Is that right?
I'm actually releasing mine on Monday morning. I think people are going back to work. Weekends are so busy for people. Monday, Tuesday, for my readers at least, I'm coming from that historical fiction background, and they're accustomed to blogs being released at certain times. So instead of doing something 2 or 3 times a week, I'm going with Monday. And it's working out fine. My story's been in the top 50 to 100 for, I think the first week I didn't climb up there, but after that, it came on pretty strong.
Well, congratulations. That's
Thank you.
really, really good news. And so when you have an episode which comes out, and I'm guessing it's on the written page, right? As a Kindle read.
It is. It comes available and it's only available on Kindle, but you can download that to your computer, your iPad, your phone. And they're fun to read if you're taking the train to work, or you're standing in line, or like I read my serials when I'm doing cardio. If I'm on the bike for 30 minutes, I can read a couple of chapters, a couple of episodes of somebody's work. So it's just a different kind of reading experience. And I think it's very 21st century.
Well, definitely with, I think, less time on people's hands for several people, and always balancing, trying to do everything at the same time. I think this is a good way and a quick way to catch something, tune in, and then you can tune out again.
Exactly.
Your convenience. So this is something that I was, thinking about asking you when we talked about the Kindlevella. How does the writing as an author differ for a Kindlevella creation where you have to end every episode with a cliffhanger versus say a novella where you probably wouldn't have to do it that way, the format?
What I'm finding, it's much more in the moment. It's right now, what's happening right now, how everyone would react. It's a good time to study Hemingway and cut those sentences down. You don't need a lot of adjectives. You don't need a lot of description, because it's all about what's happening right now. And, a character is not going to look at their outfit and say, well, I've got on my red outfit today, unless they're really on a mission. People don't think that way. So it's really taking on those characters even more than we're accustomed to doing. So it's kind of fun.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Deb. And, for the next episode with Deb, we're going to talk more about Kindlevella, which I'm just fascinated to hear and learn more about. And Deb will enlighten us with more experiences. And here's a question for you, Deb. A tip for our viewers on writing historical fiction.
Oh, just research everything. So when you sit down to write, you already know how those characters are going to react, what foods they like, what clothes they like to wear, have it all in your mind. So when you write it down, Stephen King put it best, you're just taking dictation. It's already so well researched that all you have to do is write it down.
Oh, wow. That's very powerful. Which goes to show, if you've done all the research before and you've kind of already lived in that era and soaked it in, then it's just putting it on paper, I guess. Is that right?
Exactly. That's right.
Wow.
You're exactly right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Deb, for being with us. And below the video, you'll find links to Deb's books and, of course, her Kindlevella release, which you can also download on your Kindle. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yep. And we'll tune in again to meet Deb next week and chat more with her. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks.